welcome into the Rec League podcast, REC. That's Russ, Eric, and Chris. Russ Lande from GM Junior. He is our scouting expert, and we've got Chris Martin, who has done a little playing back in his day, so he can add kind of that player's perspective. I'm Eric Edholm with Yahoo Sports. Don't know what perspective I can have, but I will always try to pass it off to the guys who know a lot about this stuff. And we're going to get into the NFL, and the first topic, it's what everyone's talking about, and frankly, maybe talking about a little bit too much. So let's try to spin this discussion about Odell Beckham. If you saw what happened, obviously, this week, Monday night, the game, he seemed to kind of lose focus a little bit against the Minnesota Vikings. Xavier Rhodes, they try to get under his skin. And we're at the point now where we're starting to see those emotions boil over quite a bit with him. Maybe the blueprint is out on stopping him. And I'll pair him up with Dez Bryant. Now, their situations are different, but Dez has shown a little bit of immaturity, both in the past and present. You know, he was asked to go to MRI, did not show up on time, has missed meetings. So there's two NFC East receivers, two of the best in the game. Russ, I'll come to you first. Is there a situation of the two of those that concerns you more, and what do they have to do about fixing it?
Well, I think in terms of off-the-field maturity, decision-making, I think Dez is obviously a bigger concern. He's had a number of issues throughout his career, and I think you always have to be concerned, is he going to be able to stay on the straight and narrow for the long term? I think right now, when you look at Odell Beckham, I think he's sort of getting a bum rap now. As a kid, you're never going to have a problem with this kid in terms of off-field. He's a good kid. He comes from a great family. I think he's just a young kid who's having a hard time sort of tying in his competitiveness and his emotionalness or his emotions, and people figure that out so far, and they know they can get under his skin. As he matures, I think this will dissipate. But I think for now, it's going to be a problem for him in games until he can get that under control. But I think that's just more about him growing and maturing because he is a good kid. You never hear about anything in New York media about this kid being arrested or this kid getting in fights out in bars or doing things like that. That's where I think you have more concern in terms of long-term on the Dez Bryant front.
Hey, Chris, I'll ask you. You have a great perspective on this. You played cornerback, so obviously you went up a lot of against a lot of diva wide receivers, a lot of guys who are emotional creatures and that sort of thing. The mental edge, I mean, if a corner can get into a receiver's head early in the game, you'd have to think there's a real tangible effect there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And there's a couple of key things that, first off, Russ hit on in talking about OBJ. As you guys know, I met him a couple of times, met his parents, Heather and Odell Sr., and he is a wonderful young man. That being said, he is lightning in a bottle. I mean, that gets on the field. That's just how he is. He's explosive. You know, sometimes he can harness it in a good way and make that turn into gold in production, and then sometimes it can cost you. I thought it was interesting, guys, when his own quarterback, Eli Manning, came out, in the presser, and he basically spoke to it and said, look, he's got to do a better job of controlling emotions. He's calling him out. I thought that was a very calculated move on his part to say, look, we want to get some pressures of the media talking and chiming in and weighing in on this, somebody to put a fence around and corral this young guy, because ultimately he is costing the team. I think when you look at the other players, though, they know that cat can ball. He's going to put his fist up and fight, maybe to his detriment sometimes, but he's a gamer. Now, all that goes out the window when you have 3 catches, and I think that's been the big issue here. The Vikings had him completely in a bottle. Credit Xavier Rhodes for that effort. But he's a kid that you got to rein him in. And I don't know if this is too big for Ben McAdoo, but right now he has to do a better job. He's the guy running that ship.
Yeah, you almost wonder if they have to put in some sort of Randy ratio from a football standpoint. Get him the ball X number of times or at least throw it in his direction. But, 0 touchdowns on the season, so I don't know if that's just part of the reason he might be kind of getting a little feisty here. Just to wrap things up, I mean, look, one thing, too, is that Dez Bryant is 4 years older than Beckham. He's had a little bit longer time in the league. I mean, Beckham, young guy, he started out with incredible hype after that catch, nowhere to go but down. He's still got some time. Their birthdays are actually one day apart, November 4th and 5th, for those who care about such things. But we're going to move on to the other big topic around the NFL this week, and that's the return of Tom Brady. It is Tom Brady week as they head to Cleveland for Sunday's 1 p.m. kickoff against the 0-4 Browns, 3-1 New England. just lost their last game to the Buffalo Bills. Realistically, what do we think about Brady's chances to just get right back into the groove? Gronk's been banged up. The other receivers have sort of come off some injuries too. Russ, what do you think? I mean, can we realistically expect Brady to jump off his white horse and throw 7 or 8 touchdowns in this game? I say no. What do you say?
No, I agree with you. I think it's going to be, he'll be solid. I mean, he's not going to make the bad mistake. I think he'll be actually more conservative this week than he usually is. And without Gronk there, I think you're going to see a lot of short passes, a lot of dump-offs to running backs, a lot of quick-hitting stuff. I don't think they want to sit him in the pocket too long in that first game back because the timing is going to be off. You want that to develop over a few weeks of practice. But I really think the Patriots are in the best possible position. They won those first 3, and then they get shut out last week. So all Tom has to do this week is avoid mistakes as he gets back into the groove because that team's going to come out and want to play their best game of the year after last week's embarrassment and having Tom back with them.
Yeah, I mean, how big is the motivation factor? I mean, with Tom Brady, we never doubted. He's been doing this, 17 years or whatever. Chris, I just wonder, is this the kind of thing that Tom Brady might be even better than before, or is there a legitimate concern that he may have some rust here, that this isn't going to be an MVP candidate when he comes back? I guess I'm curious where you think his head is right now, and also where his physical skills are.
They got the Cleveland Browns, right?
That's true. That is true.
I mean, come on, guys. We have to. We got to call a spade here. The Cleveland Browns secondary, I've seen the tape on them. They are absolutely abysmal. So he can step right out of Italy if that's where he was vacationing on his sabbatical or whatever, and come out and he's going to be spinning the rock. I don't think he's going to show any rust. I think the issue will be for the receivers. Now you're talking about ball velocity, the way the ball spins, the angles that it comes in. Maybe a little bit different than Brissett and Garoppolo. So I think those guys may have to adjust. But I wouldn't expect this to be a tall task for Brady going in. The Browns are that bad right now. They're pretty dysfunctional, even though they're trying hard. I just don't think they have the talent to match up. So I think Brady will come out there to play well. I think we should speak to also the leadership that he'll bring back in that locker room. I think that's what his guys are glad to have him back. So old TB12, I think, is going to be fine. He'll probably have a big day.
Yeah, I tend to agree that obviously in the long run they'll be fine. But I will say this Browns team has surprised me in a couple ways. Yes, their record is bad. Yes, that defense you mentioned is bad. But they're running the rock. They are running the football exceptionally well. I didn't think Crowell was that kind of good back. You can at least try to play keep away. Terrell Pryor's been doing some good things. Hugh Jackson, we know he'll give you a lot to chew on with formations, with trick plays. I mean, he'll just dump the playbook out in this one. So I almost wonder if the bigger concern may not be something on the other end, where the Patriots defense, which has kind of been asked to carry the load to this point, Chris, are they maybe coming into this game a little bit more beat up than they should be and asked to do too much?
Touche. Yeah, I'll give you that one. I think what it shows or speaks to is that Hugh Jackson can coach his tail off because I think every game he goes in, he knows he's bringing a knife to a gunfight from a talent standpoint. But as you mentioned, schematically, he's done some creative things with that offense to get the run game going, get Terrell Pryor, whether it's doing jet sweep, whether it's Wildcat, whether it's receiver, safety, whatever. He's playing at a high level. So I think that's just a great example of how good a coach Hugh Jackson is. And there are some holes in that Patriot defense. I think you point out a point that's certainly worth noting, and I would expect the Browns to have some success, but in the end, I just think the Patriots are way too talented.
All right, let's wrap this up, Russ. Quick thoughts on what you've seen from the front office of the Cleveland Browns. I know this is about Brady and the Patriots, but this team is 0-4, but they played hard. They a couple breaks, maybe it could even be 3-1. We know they're not a good football team yet, but the approach of this front office and what they've done to this point in terms of building the roster up from the ground up, do you like it? Are you suspect? Where are you at right now?
I like it. I think they've done a lot of good things in terms of going with the youth movement, but I think they've made it apparently clear that they are ready to lose for 2 or 3 years and lose big in terms of 2 wins, 3 wins for a number of years. Because if you look, they had some veterans they could have kept around that at least could have helped them, could have mentored some of these young guys. They said, nope, it's all right. Let's blow out a lot of these guys that ended up going to other teams and finding homes because they just wanted all these draft picks and they want to get the youth movement going. They want all these draft picks to play this year. So I understand what they're doing. The question is, as a front office, are you 100% sure that this owner who seems to hire and fire GMs and coaches every other year, is he going to have the patience for 3 years of 2, 3, and 4 wins? That would be my concern. But I do understand and like what they're doing if you buy their philosophy.
I wonder what happens to Joe Thomas, the one sort of guy that's left over, the one talented player they might be able to trade and get something for if they so choose. But let's move on to topic number 3. I think through the quarter part of the season, you could probably say that the Minnesota Vikings and Denver Broncos, in whichever order, have the 2 best defenses in the NFL. We've seen, carrying over from last year, Von Miller sits out the whole season, or off season, I should say. He's okay. I think the Dancing with the Stars thing suited him all right. He's on pace for about 22, 23 sacks, even being mentioned as an MVP candidate. And then these Vikings. I mean, I think production-wise, eye test-wise, we've seen that same caliber of game-changing defense. They did a number on the Panthers. They did a number on the Packers. They shut down the Giants as well. So, Chris, I'll come to you first. Right off the top, do you think there's one that is clearly better than the other between the Vikings D and the Broncos D?
Well, I'll go right to the teams that you just named, E, and those all have, high-level quarterbacks, some of the best quarterbacks in the game that they shut down. You look at Manning, Cam Newton, and, of course, Aaron Rodgers. Listen, I said this last week, and I stand by it. Right now, Minnesota Vikings have the best defense in the NFL, right? And they're playing the best football. Why? It's because of 2 things. They have a tremendous amount of depth, and I'll give Rick Spielman credit again for the talent that he's gotten in there. But if you look at every layer of their defense, they're solid. Up front, Everson Griffin, he is a nightmare to deal with. Danielle Hunter, he's very tough and athletic, hard to block. And then you got Linval Joseph, who's 330 pounds inside, so they can beat you inside and off the edge. And then you go to their linebackers, Kendricks and Anthony Barr, 6'5", mangy linebacker. And then on the back end, we saw Xavier Rhodes is healthy, what he can do. Like he erased OBJ. You got Trey Waynes coming in, Harrison Smith. So they're just loaded at talent. And Zimmer's done a nice job coaching these guys up. They're playing with a great deal of confidence. They believe they should win and shut down every offense that they face when they step between the white lines. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who say, well, have you forgot about the Broncos and the Super Bowl and all that? I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. I'm looking in the here and now, and the eye test tells me that the Minnesota Vikings defense, Russ, they're legit. They're going to keep this team in every game. And I think, it's not a far cry based on what I've seen to think that they may end up potentially in Houston for the Super Bowl.
Wow. Russ, you agree with that?
To me, you could almost flip a coin because I think when you look at the depth up front between Denver and Minnesota, I think it's pretty remarkable. I think Denver may have a few more guys when you look at guys like Shane Ray that are young guys like Danielle Hunter. With the Vikings, here's a guy that's maybe a little bit further along than Hunter. And obviously, Miller, to me, is the best on either team at just finding a way to get behind the line of scrimmage. But these are 2 elite defenses. The one thing that I will say is when I'm watching that Giants game and Minnesota obviously shut them down, I didn't see them getting great pressure on Eli. I saw Eli, the moment he couldn't find a guy, he just threw it away. He just didn't seem like he was comfortable sitting there and waiting for plays to develop. I think these are 2 elite defenses, but I will say, to me, the difference, and this is why I give Denver a slight nod, is just Von Miller. If there's one guy on either defense that I trust can change a game if it's one down, that to me is the best player on either defense.
That's true. No, look, in the Vikings, as Chris mentioned, the depth and
it's incredible.
Barr's playing incredibly well. I love Barr. I love Griffin when he's not jumping off sides, and Hunter's really coming into his own. So Harrison Smith, the kind of the quiet ninja there in the back, he can really step up and make some plays. But you're right, when you have to account for what Vaughn does, that certainly changes it. Chris, you mentioned the Super Bowl. Last point on this topic, could they follow that blueprint of what the 2015 Broncos did? And that's obviously Sam Bradford's playing well, but really the run game is a question now with AP out. The offensive line is a mess. A lot of the same ideas of what happened last year with the Broncos.
Well, I think eventually you're going to start hearing people like us start throwing out the D words and their team of destiny. when they keep going. You see what happens with their quarterback in Bridgewater. They make the trade that now looks like a masterful move to get Sam Bradford there. You put him in Norv Turner's offense, and he seems like a great executor of it. And so you look at Minnesota and you start to think, yeah, I think they have enough gas in the tank to get there. I mean, we'll see how Green Bay feels about that, who I think might be having their own sort of issues they're getting their arms around. So I think they do have a chance. They're going to hit a couple stumbles. I don't think it's always going to be 90 degrees and sunny. But I think based on the talent, how they're playing, how they're coached up, offensively, defensively, yeah, I think they've got a shot.
All right, let's move on to topic number 4. A lot of people saying, what is wrong with the 1-3 Carolina Panthers? Cam Newton has been banged up. He is in the concussion protocol. There is some concern about this weekend's game, Monday night's game, I should say. What are we most concerned about? Is it Cam exposing himself to hits? Is it the offensive line? Or is it this list of other worries suddenly? The secondary, the pass rush, finding more playmakers on offense. It's like, hey, this is a 15-1 team a year ago. That didn't change a lot. But at the same time, obviously, you lose Josh Norman. A couple things don't work out as cleanly. Get some worries, Russ, don't we?
Well, yeah, I think there are two things to me at play here. Offensively, I think a lot of teams last year, obviously, once the ball got rolling, their offense was playing great. This offseason, teams had a chance to look at everything Carolina did last year, figure out the things they did best, and take them away this year, attack some of the weak links on that offensive line. And I think the Panthers have yet to adjust offensively and make up for that to where they're playing at a high level. And defensively, it's funny. I think everybody points to Josh Norman not being there. And to me, the bigger issue is who's getting to the quarterback for them. I don't see anybody getting behind the line of scrimmage and consistently putting pressure on the quarterback. And Chris, I think, would probably tell anybody that an average corner becomes good and a good becomes elite when there's a constant pass rush. I don't see the pass rush there in Carolina this year. Charles Johnson's not doing a whole lot. I just don't see guys getting behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm concerned about their front, not really their secondary as much.
Chris, Josh Norman, the young kids, pass rush, those are all concerns. Do they trump the worries about Cam's health in your mind?
I think Josh Norman said it best. You get what you pay for. They didn't they made a business decision. I get it. I understand it. Obviously, I know those folks in those offices down there pretty well. But listen, some of this is a byproduct of that. I mean, Josh Norman, Russ, you spoke to it. If you get pass rush, those guys get home when you're holding coverage longer. Right now, these guys aren't holding coverage at all.
Exactly.
Low buys. Guys are running down the field. They're running naked. And these corners can't hold up. And so it's kind of a worst-case storm. It looks like a team that is almost the antithesis of what we saw last year. No swagger, no confidence. Cam Newton still doing dumb things like not getting down and sauntering into the end zone. Mm-hmm. And, I think all of that is hurting this team. And I wouldn't be surprised if Monday night, I think I'm scheduled to be at that game, if Tampa Bay doesn't go there right on their own turf and take that game, and Jameis Winston comes in and lights these guys up. So if they do not win on Monday, I think now people are going to start to pull the alarm bells in this team.
A little quick note that was breaking as we went on air here. Carson Palmer has been ruled out for another team that's 1-3 with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, or what we thought may be legitimate. So Drew Stanton will go in the game on Thursday, and a big one. Obviously, they've got to win or face 1-4 start. Topic 5, let's shift now to the NFL draft. We do a little draft college football talk, and I think some of the big takeaways, besides me being at the LSU game, and we'll call it the LSU game because they stomped Mizzou 42-7 in Ed Orgeron's debut. By the way, guys, absolutely beautiful down there. Got to go to Tiger Stadium if you've not been, and just a tremendous environment down there. Very impressed by LSU's defense as well. But one of the other big stories came from last Friday, and that was Washington beating Stanford before the big Clemson-Louisville game. So I don't know if we've given Washington enough love so far this season. I mean, they are fantastic. Have you guys gotten to see the Huskies that much? Do we think they're kind of in that national title contender discussion a little bit?
To me, I think, they have to be, especially when you look at the other teams within that Pac-12. I don't think there's another team that really can compete with them. I mean, USC, to me, they're a losing program this year. I was not impressed with Stanford the week before when they beat UCLA. They barely won over a UCLA team that I don't think is particularly good. And Washington destroyed Stanford. And I think they showed that Stanford at quarterback is really lacking. They're a one-dimensional team. It's just Christian McCaffrey. So, yeah, I think Washington, if they win out and go undefeated out of the Pac-12, I think I'd be shocked if they're not part of the playoff picture because I can't see them losing a game until the playoffs this year. They look like a dominant program.
Chris, what are your thoughts? I mean, the Huskies legit. I mean, Browning has done some nice things. They've got great defensive talent on that side of the ball. They've got a running back who can do some work. So what do you think about them?
Yeah, they got some big hosses inside on defense that really dictate tempo on things. And they're well coached. I mean, let's give them their props that way. And I also think they faced a team in Stanford that fell flat on its face. I mean, Coach Shaw will tell you that they weren't prepared. I watched that game. There was no fire. There was no fight. And Russ, you said Stanford one-dimensional. Well, hell, if you're Christian McCaffrey, you cannot make big splash plays if you are that one-dimensional. He hasn't been doing that like he has done in the past. So Stanford's trying to find their way. Washington, they're super hot right now, and anybody that's lining up to play them, they're going to have their hands full. I don't know if they'll end up in the playoff picture, but I think they'll make a lot of noise this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people look to the game that happened the next day. Louisville at Clemson. Clemson gets up big. Louisville makes the great comeback, and then Clemson kind of has to fight them off there at the end. Let's talk about Louisville because they were obviously one of the big stories the first 4 weeks of the season. Guys, do you think they still have a shot, given the quality of the loss, the fact that it was on the road, the fact that they have a marquee quarterback? Can they be in the discussion for the Final Four? Can they be one of those 4 playoff teams, even though they've suffered this loss?
You know, I think the tough thing for them, at least when I watched them, I think the young quarterback, Jackson, he's an impressive kid in terms of athleticism, ability to make big plays, but he's not a very consistent guy in terms of accuracy and footwork, and I think they're going to have a few more big games this year. I have a feeling they'll lose one more game, and that's going to knock them out of the playoffs. If they don't lose another game, yeah, they're going to be in that mix, one of the few 3 or 4 one-loss teams that is fighting for that one spot in the playoffs with the other undefeated teams probably. But I really think they're going to lose 1, if not 2 more games this year. So I'd be surprised if they end up in the playoffs.
All right, Chris, I mean, Louisville, do they have enough defensive talent? Is there the big picture there in your mind? I mean, let's face it, this is as good a loss as you could ever have and keep your mathematical hopes alive. But will they get it done? Is this a team that can maybe run the table from this point?
Well, yeah, no, I think you're dead on. And to me, the question is, if they do run the table, will they get in? And I think, yes, they'll have an opportunity because you can't tell me that losing to a Clemson team that's got a hell of a lot of talent on their own soil in one of the hardest places to play and a very close matchup would extricate them and knock them out. I just don't think that would be the case. But I think you're right in that the quarterback's got to be more consistent. He's got to throw the ball a little more efficiency and accuracy through some tight windows. But this is still a talented team. I think Coach Petrino, my hat's off to him. He's done a nice job. They'll still be in the conversation if they can win out.
Last one, Russ will ask for a little draft nugget. Is there a player you've sort of been keeping your eye on and been impressed with? Maybe someone a little bit below the radar that fans can start looking up and keeping an eye on for next spring?
Yeah, there's a kid, he jumped out at me 2 years ago, a kid named Donnell Pumphrey, a running back, receiver, returner out of San Diego State. 2 years ago when I was looking at some of their prospects, he jumped off the film. He's number 19. When you watch him, the end of last year, the beginning of this year, you see a guy that, in my opinion, could not have come out of college at a better time in history. When you look at the NFL, what they're asking backs like him to do, 15 years ago, he would have been labeled strictly a third down back, wouldn't have played anywhere else. I think when you look at him now, he can be a slash back who splits the carries with a big back. He can line up as a slot receiver. He can line up as an outside receiver, and he can be a return guy. I think this guy, you talked about it earlier, Chris, you mentioned lightning in a bottle. That's what this kid is to me. He's a guy that if you move him around, if you have a good, creative offensive coordinator, you could have a very special chess piece in Pumphrey. But I will say, if he goes to a team with a traditional, old-school offensive coordinator who can think outside the box, I think you're going to be talking about a kid like Ronnie Hillman who ends up not finding a home and can't sort of establish himself. But I think if you put him somewhere with a really creative guy, you could be talking about a guy that gets 1,500 to 2,000 combined yards, returns, catches, and running on a regular basis in the NFL. I think this kid's pretty special.
You see that kind of player, Chris?
Yeah, I love the player. I've watched a lot of his games. I think he gives you some position flex that you're going to look for because you can get some matchups with the kid. I think he is a dynamic talent. And I'm going to throw a name out there to both you guys, too, on a kid that I have fallen in love with this year, Carroll Phillips. He's kind of a defensive and outside backer at Illinois. He's playing under Coach Lovie Smith. This guy is special. And you remember Whitney Merciless when he came out of there. He's one of the tops in the nation in sacks. Ultimately went in the first round. I think that's the path that this kid is on. He's on a meteoric rise. He's a sack waiting to happen. A JUCO transfer, so not a ton of people have buzz on him, but he is a guy that can take over a game and looks to be the next dominant player and first rounder to come out of Illinois.
And it's funny, Chris, because DeJuan Smoot was sort of seen as the greater prospect coming into the year, and all of a sudden people are saying, well, maybe he's opening things up for Phillips, but Phillips has put some big tape out there now, and he's looked really good. A nice fit in that kind of Tampa-style front that they have there. It seems like he's adapting better than Smoot has almost.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think he can win those matchups. You know, I think it'll be important for him down the stretch because he's going to see some double teams because he's been wreaking havoc. But also he's affecting a lot of throws. He's rangy. He's got the length that you want in the league. So this guy's an explosive type athlete. Those guys are rare on the college level. So I think he will certainly have the arrow pointed up.
We will always have the arrow pointed up here on the Rec League, REC. Russ, Eric, Chris, bringing you all the news from around the NFL, our opinions on what's going on in football. We sprinkle a little college and NFL draft talk as well. So we will see you back here at this point next week. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a note. Let us know what we're doing well, what we can improve on, and how we can best serve you. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Good stuff. See you guys.
Adios.
Take it easy. All right.